available to you. But today we were talking about making communication more clear, and we're talking about Don Miller. Don Miller has so much education. It's not just marketing. Don Miller has an entire course on how to take your entire business to the next level. And so let's jump in.
Business Made Simple.
If the average person spends 30% of their time daydreaming, we are going to need a powerful device to make them pay attention. We have to wake people up if we are going to inspire change. So the tool that we are going to use is story. People love to hear, watch, and read stories. Stories has the power to captivate the human brain like no other device. In fact, studies show that if you want to change people's thoughts, feelings, and actions, the fastest way to do so is to help them enter into something called narrative transportation. Narrative transportation happens when people buy in or they fully engage a story. This can happen while watching a movie or reading a book, watching the news, or even hearing a speech. The goal of the Communication Made Simple framework, then, is to help you create a message that has a narrative structure and invites an audience into narrative transportation. Again, the two components of the Communication Made Simple campaign will be the Communication Made Simple framework, followed by the Communication Made Simple playbook. The framework is where you will create a message. You're going to clarify your message using this framework that we've created. And then the playbook is how you will actually execute that message. Both are critical. The framework, though, is how we are going to structure a message so that people actually engage. And to do that, we are going to use the elements from ancient story formulas. You know, formulas have been used to tell stories for centuries. Ever since the days of Plato, formulas have been passed down and improved. And when a storyteller follows them, audiences pay attention. If we're going to write a screenplay or a novel, we might need 30 or more story elements to include. But for purposes of creating a messaging campaign, I'm going to introduce you to 8 story elements you will be able to use to engage and explain anything to anybody in such a way they are eager to know more. When you want to communicate something, you will want to filter your ideas through the Communication Made Simple framework in order to generate the talking points you will then use in the execution playbook. The key here is to reduce all those very complicated ideas you want to communicate into 8 simple talking points that you will repeat over and over as you execute the Communication Made Simple playbook. So again, first you filter your message through the framework, then you execute that message through the playbook. When you are explaining a merger to shareholders or launching a new initiative, or you're explaining a new benefits package, or even introducing a new executive leader to the team, everything hinges on repeating the same talking points over and over so that people engage in the narrative and take the action that drives positive change. Every effective communication campaign is essentially an exercise in memorization. Cutting through the clutter and inviting people into a story means we repeat the same ideas over and over in a disciplined manner. We just can't go off script. So, what ideas do we need to communicate? Well, each of them are on the Communication Made Simple Talking Points worksheet. So this is the worksheet that you have there in your printout. You want to put it into a
So Nico's working on getting the link to the worksheet, and he'll put that in the chat for you guys so that you'll have that by the end of this coaching session.
3-ring binder that'll help you a great deal. And this binder is going to hold all of your corporate communication. It's going to be in one simple place so your entire team can reference it and be aligned. First, let's look at the Communication Made Simple framework. These elements aren't unlike my story elements in the StoryBrand marketing framework, except they are adapted a bit so they work to give a great speech or make a video, write an email, create social media posts, and even eventually create a press release if you want to do so. But once you have a general idea of what you want to communicate, filter those ideas through these 8 elements in the Communication Made Simple Talking Points worksheet. So the first step in creating a communication campaign is to fill out this worksheet. Filling out the worksheet streamlines your thoughts and clarifies your message. Not only this, but after you fill out the worksheet, you and your entire team will be on the same page in how you talk about whatever initiative that you are working on. In fact, your communication strategy can be simply organized into a binder like this so that each initiative enjoys its own talking points for anybody in the organization to reference. Okay, let's look at each element on the worksheet so we can understand why talking points for each section are so important. First, you will want to define your controlling idea. A controlling idea is a device writers use to define what their book or their speech or their movie or just about anything else is really about. Most good stories have a controlling idea. You know, the controlling idea of Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet is that love is worth dying for. The controlling idea of Steinbeck's East of Eden is that the world is an epic drama about good versus evil, and we get to decide which side we will support. In Star Wars, the controlling idea might be that tyranny must be resisted at all costs. But it's not just fictional stories that have controlling ideas. Churchill's communication campaign to inspire the British people is that evil must be resisted even to the point of death. The controlling idea of the Boston Tea Party is that taxation without representation is unjust. You know, for years, I wrote books and gave speeches, and after a book reading, people would come up to me and ask, what one thing was I trying to say in the book? This always bothered me, because if I took the time to write a 300-page book, I did so because there was more than just one thing I wanted you to know. But then I realized this is actually how the human brain works. People are hungry for leaders to simplify their messages, not because they're lazy, but because the brain was designed to take confusing information and organize it in such a way it can easily be understood and acted upon. So before you begin working on your speech, your video, your social media posts, and even your press release, you should first make your ideas easy to understand by defining a single controlling idea. Defining your controlling idea is the fastest way, by the way, to affect change. Your controlling idea is the idea all of your communication will attempt to prove to be true. What's the point you're trying to prove? In an intercompany campaign, the idea might be that an increase in overall efficiency means more profit gets shared by more team members, or that a new visionary leader will allow us to meet the challenging demands of the coming decade. Once you know your controlling idea, it will serve as a filter for the rest of the ideas in your campaign. The controlling idea is the most important element in the Communication Made Simple framework because it is the idea you are trying to get people to memorize. Remember, a good communication campaign is an exercise in memorization. You are trying to get people to remember really, but also memorize something. After you run the Communication Made Simple playbook, people within reach of your campaign should all be able to recite the controlling idea without realizing you ever had a controlling idea. You sort of, tricked them into memorizing it because you kept repeating the same thing. That's the power of a campaign strategy. You get people, they've heard it so many times, they say it back to you. And it's only when they say it back to you that you begin to affect change. But unless the controlling idea is short, interesting, and memorable, it won't work. Do not be elusive when defining the controlling idea of your campaign. Be clear and be precise.
So if you want to get people to do business with you, and this is something that for those of you who have attended Virtual Advisor Power Hour, what are the three things that Jeremiah Desmarais clearly communicated that we all have to accomplish before somebody's willing to do business with us? We have to get them to do what?
Know, like, trust.
Know, and trust.
Yeah, there we go. See? That's a perfect example of exactly what he's talking about. We all memorized like, know, and trust. And that is a clear communication point to get them to take action in order to do business. So let's continue.
So listen, in a later video, JJ Kula and I will show you an example of a good controlling idea, and it will help you create one of your own. Regardless, the first step in the framework is to define a controlling idea. It's the first box here. If you don't have one, nobody will know what your campaign was really about, okay? So that's first, and again, we'll show you some examples later that give you some clarity, but right now I want to introduce you to the rest of the talking points worksheet. Second, you're going to want to define the story question you will propose within your communication campaign. Stories keep people interested because they pose questions that get answered only if you keep paying attention to the story. You know, will the hero disarm the bomb, or will the team win the championship? Will the villain come to justice? Will the couple finally get married? These are story questions that make us pay attention to the movie or make us keep reading the book. Every good story has an obvious and interesting story question that keeps the audience engaged. So as it relates to business, a story question might be something like, will our fourth quarter revenue beat expectations? Or will our new product rollout help us dominate market share? Before launching any communication campaign, we want to define the story question the campaign is posing. When that question is clear, the campaign will engage more people and more people will take action to affect the answer. You know, can we disrupt the industry? Or will our new safety guidelines make the safest factory in the world right here where we work? Will our new execution program make everybody's job more clear? The story question is the question you want people to ask themselves as they interact with the communication campaign. So you're going to have to repeat within the campaign both the controlling idea and the story question over and over. Once again, after you give a speech, you want people walking out of the room asking themselves this question, that story question. When they're looking at your social media, this question should be seated inside of that social media. The question should actually maybe even be a question inside of a press release, right? This is the story question, the question you want people asking themselves as they interact with your campaign. And the only way they're going to ask themselves that question as they interact with your campaign is if you put the actual question inside the campaign and say it over and over. So you can see what we're already doing here is creating the talking points that we're going to repeat to get people to memorize our ideas and invite them into narrative transportation. All right, as it relates to the story question, later JJ Kula and I will show you an example of a really good story question, and that's going to give you a better idea of what this needs to be, right? But the third element of the Communication Made Simple framework is to agitate the problem. Defining the controlling idea and story question tell us what the story is about, but it's not until we agitate the actual problem that the story begins. Stories do not get interesting until the hero encounters a significant challenge. If a hero does not encounter a problem, the audience will lose interest. In our communication campaign, we need to define a problem we are trying to overcome. When we define a problem, the audience automatically enters into narrative transportation. That's really where narrative transportation probably begins, is when the hero or the lead characters encounter some sort of challenge and we wonder whether or not they're going to be able to overcome that challenge. So Luke Skywalker takes a stand against tyranny. The American hockey team in the movie Miracle faces the formidable foe of the Russians. Remember that? That's a story question. And it happens because we've agitated a problem. These Russians are so good. Can they win? Will they win? That's the story question of that movie. Politicians run their campaigns trying to solve a terrible problem that the American people are facing. Even if they have to make up the problem and agitate it, that's how their campaign becomes interesting. People, they migrate toward a political leader who can help them solve a problem. They've got to agitate that problem in order to increase or elevate their standing in the race. As you define the problem, how do you agitate it? Well, if you really want to agitate the problem, define the 3 levels of problem your communication campaign is addressing. If you know the StoryBrand framework, you know that it is external, it's internal, and it's philosophical. So for external, you know, something like outsourcing our shipping is costing too much money. That's the external problem, right? The internal problem might be this is costing us all a lot of money in our profit share, and we feel like we're being ripped off, right? That's a feeling, and you want to hit here with the feeling. Philosophically, we shouldn't be paying more to some other company for something that we can do ourselves. So if you really want to agitate the problem, external, internal, philosophical. I'm not going to go too deep on that, but you've already got the StoryBrand messaging course. It goes very deep into external, internal, philosophical. So if you really want to take a deep dive in this, go back.
So one of the things I want to highlight here today, which he's putting an extra emphasis, we've heard a lot of this information before, but he's putting a huge emphasis on aggravating the problem And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that our advisors make when they try and make some sort of a either webinar or seminar, live in-person workshop presentation, is that we forget, we think that we're there to show them, educate them, some sort of solution that you have. But the problem is, if we don't, if we haven't fully expressed the challenge and the problem that they face, and they don't understand the stakes that they're facing if they don't address the problem, then there's no motivation for them to want to set up a meeting with you or care about the solution itself. So what I've discovered, and especially during the pandemic, is that workshop webinar presentations are more about talking about and making your invitee, your attendees, more aware of what's at stake for the problem is 10 times more important than you presenting the solution. In fact, if you present the problem and you insinuate the solution or educate the solution during your workshop or seminar, then often what will happen is they feel like you've made them aware of the problem, you've given them the solution, and now they can go do it on their own. They're information hunting, they're resource hunting. And what you don't want is to spend a lot of money for people to be gathering information so they can go do things on their own, or take that information and go to an existing trusted advisor to address the very same issues. So my encouragement is, it's really important to all presentations that you do, make sure they're really focused on getting deep into the multifaceted problem that needs a very advanced solution that only you can provide. But you got to get deep into the problem so that they feel like, I need somebody who's really on top of understanding all the pitfalls of this problem so that I'm not left vulnerable. I feel like I found somebody who understands the complexities of these vulnerabilities. I don't want to put my retirement at risk, my family legacy at risk. And so I'm going to go with the person I believe understands the problem better than anybody else, because they could find somebody who has a great solution. But if the person who has the solution doesn't understand all the vulnerabilities of the problem, then they may solve one part of the problem and leave you vulnerable for all the rest. The more you communicate that you understand the problem, the more that they're going to lean in to you for the unique solution.
Back and watch the StoryBrand 7-part framework course in Business Made Simple. It's going to elaborate on this. But do know, if you just define the problem, that's 90% of the work. It's really, really powerful to get the story moving. Okay, so the fourth element of the Communication Made Simple framework involves defining the stakes. When we define the stakes, we're defining what will be won or lost if we do or do not complete this objective. If there are no stakes, there is no story. When you remove the stakes from the story, you remove any necessity for people to act or to even pay attention. Remember, one of the things we're trying to do here is be interesting. And things get way more interesting when there are stakes. When a speaker stands up or some communication strategy involves, look, great things can happen if we do this, terrible things are going to happen if we don't, everything gets more interesting. It's the stakes, the stakes, the stakes. And a lot of you are doing this intuitively. You're putting in stakes, but this worksheet will make sure that you actually have defined what the stakes are so that you keep using the same stakes over and over and repeating them. And the more you repeat the stakes, the more people metabolize that information, the more interesting it becomes, and the more it motivates action. If you just throw spaghetti against the wall with your communication strategy, you'll use a bunch of different stakes intuitively and won't reinforce the same stakes, which really dilutes the story. When you
and I apologize in advance. I know I use Brian Moriarty often, but it's an easy example to give that we all understand. He's very clear. What are the stakes that he communicates for the Canadian multi-generational farm or ranch?
Stakes are losing the farm.
That's it. That's exactly right. And it's just that simple. So whatever it is that the stakes that you solve and that you can prevent from happening, And again, it can be multiple, and you can do multiple things. You can solve multiple problems outside of that. But I think there needs to be one specific, narrow highlight that you're most talented at that you can solve in addition to everything else that you do. And I think when people get clear about that, I know for our firm and for my dad, it was always about if you're concerned about taxation because you've accumulated enough wealth to be very concerned about taxes, then they referred people to my dad, or they wanted to meet with him because they were trying to keep as much of their wealth in the family because of all the sacrifices they'd made. And a lot of it were, I would say, immigrants, second generation immigrants that came here, made lots of sacrifices, got their kids into school, and sacrificed everything to come here and to give them a better future. And they didn't want half of that going to the government because they had sacrificed so much was at stake. And they gave up their own freedoms to be able to travel and do all the things they want in retirement because they wanted every single dollar going to their kids for the next generation to make the next generation better. And so we attracted that type of client, which typically was an engineer, second generation engineer from another country, usually in Asia. And we have a lot of clients that are specific to that. So figure out what it is and that you could, the main problem you can solve, but remember that it doesn't put you in a corner because you can solve other problems too. It's just the one thing you're known for doing best at, even though there's other things you do very, very well.
Define the stakes. Simply ask yourself what can be won or lost if you do or do not accomplish the objectives set forth in the communication campaign. Okay, the fifth element of the Communication Made Simple framework will be to position yourself as the guide. In most stories, a character shows up to help the hero win the day. We call this character the guide. And when you are rolling out a communication campaign, position yourself as the guide in the story, not the hero. Speech expert Nancy Duarte recommends positioning the audience, in fact, as Luke Skywalker when you give a speech, and positioning yourself as Yoda. You are not the hero in the story. The audience is the hero in the story. You are simply there to make sure the hero wins the day. Another reason you want to position yourself as the guide is because the guide is a strong character in the story, while the hero is actually a weak character. The hero is unsure of themselves and unwilling to take action, and they're in need of help. So don't position yourself as a weak character. Position yourself as a strong character who can help the hero win the day. This is really critical. This is where most people in a communication campaign make huge mistakes. They position themselves as the hero. They talk about the history of the company, how long they've been in business, their great places to work metric, us. You really want to talk to the people that you're trying to convince to take action and make the story about them. In other words, don't tell your story. Invite people into a story. This does not mean, though, that you can't talk about yourself. You can talk about yourself all day. There's a special way to do it, though. You'll remember from the StoryBrand framework in my book, Building a Story Brand, or the StoryBrand course, that the keys to positioning yourself as the guide in the story are to demonstrate empathy and authority. In your talking points for your communication campaign, you will want to write an empathetic statement that you can deliver to your audience, along with a statement of authority or competency. That's going to position you as the guide in the story. And listen, your audience is looking for a guide. They're not looking for another hero. You know, when people are insecure, they talk about themselves. When they are confident, they talk about others. And when we're looking for a leader, we want somebody who is competent and confident. So talk about them, invite them into the story, and your communication strategy is going to go a lot better. When you communicate empathy and authority to the audience, they will position you as the guide in their lives. The sixth element of the Communication Made Simple framework is the plan. Now that we've let people know where we want to take them and explain why it's important, it's time to tell them how we are actually going to get them there. So the plan is the part of the communication campaign where we lay out a map and explain to the audience how we're going to get them where we want them to go. Most communicators actually lead with the plan, which is a mistake. You know, the plan is the part of the communication strategy where we put all the bullet points in and all the data in and all the graphs and the charts. And a lot of times you'll hear a speech and that's what they start with. But they've never told us why it actually matters. They never told us what will be won or lost if we don't take action, or why the data is important. Now, a lot of other communication teachers will say, leave the data out. Just, you know, put that in some white paper and let people study it. Yeah, you can't, and you know you can't. And I would say, though, you don't actually have to. If you actually tell people what's at stake, what the story question is, what the controlling idea is, what the challenge that we're up against is, the plan can be put in there. That said, you do want to simplify the plan as much as possible. So try breaking down the data into some sort of 3-step plan, if at all possible. Even if you have to have 3 sets of data, you know, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, or we're going to do this, which should result in this, which should result in this. People like groups of 3. It's staggering how much separating information into 3 sets of 3 gets more retention slightly than 4, and then way more retention than sets of 5. So again, break up your data into groups of 3. Essentially, what you're asking people to do when you present a bunch of complicated information in which there are no stakes is you're asking them to move into a fog. People feel threatened when they move into a fog. They don't like moving into an intellectual fog. So the job of a plan is to help people realize how we're going to get this done, how we're going to get from here to there, which often involves data. But if you make that simple, if you simplify the data and put it into sets of 3, they will follow you. They will follow you, so you don't have to lose the data. So in the talking points for your communication campaign, spell out a simple plan people can follow to accomplish the objective. If you keep it simple and lift the fog, you will be more likely to get an audience to buy in, okay? So the 7th element of the Communication Made Simple framework is the call to action. Inside any sort of communication campaign, a call to action must be spelled out that tells people exactly what you want them to do. Many communicators actually fail to include a call to action, which is somewhat amazing because that's the whole point of the communication strategy, is to get people to take action on whatever it is that is your objective. An audience is always subconsciously asking, what do you want me to do? Many communicators do not do this because they don't sense they have authority. They just want to sort of present the idea, but then they don't really feel like they have the authority to actually tell anybody what to do. This makes you come off, or your company, your brand, your whole strategy comes off as weak, right? People are looking for you to tell them what to do. You know, I did an experiment, or an exercise really, with a class that I was teaching, about 200 executives, and we were talking about communication. And I said, listen, I'm going to tell you one of the most important points that I can make about leading in business, but I'm going to tell you on the curb outside of this classroom. We happen to be in downtown Nashville, and I just put my microphone down and I walked out the door outside of this building. And a team member of mine put a box there for me, and there was a bullhorn there. I asked people to gather around closely because they followed me outside the building. I picked up the bullhorn and I said, here's the point I wanted to make. People will go where you tell them to go. All right, let's go back inside. And everybody kind of laughed and giggled. Maybe some people might have been frustrated because I wasted some time, but I don't feel like I wasted any time at all. I showed them the power of just telling people what to do. And that call to action has to be clear. You will want to give the audience a chance to buy in on your objective, and this is where you actually do that. You give them a call to action that asks them to put skin in the game. So deliver the call to action with confidence, and make sure you're taking people someplace good, but there's got to be a call to action for them to participate in the campaign. And your communication campaign asks the audience to do something in response. This will ensure you get tangible buy-in for your objective. Finally, the 8th element of the Communication Made Simple framework is to foreshadow the climactic scene. A great story heads toward a climactic scene in which all of the conflict is resolved in one shot. When Luke Skywalker destroys the Death Star, that's the climactic scene, and all the problems are resolved. When Rudy plays a down for Notre Dame in the movie Rudy, That's the climactic scene, right? The external, internal, and philosophical conflict are resolved. When you foreshadow a climactic scene, you give the audience a vision that they can head toward. In that vision, the conflict is resolved and the objective is accomplished. So this is going to be something that happens in the future. If we execute on this communication campaign, if we do this thing, we're going to experience a climactic scene, but you need to make sure that you say what that is. A couple rules on that. The first is you want to make it visual, right? Can you actually see it? If you can't picture it, then it's not going to work. You know, for instance, when John Kennedy was running for president, he gave a speech at Rice University in Houston, I think it was 1962. And he talked about the fact that if he is elected president, we are going to put a man on the moon. It was something visual. It was something people could actually imagine. As crazy as it sounded back then, it was something they could actually visualize in their brain. You know, if he would have said something like, you know, if I'm elected president, we're going to create a space program that spins off a ton of research and development and creates products in the private sector that increase our GDP, helping us compete with China and Russia and Saudi Arabia so that we have less debt and can leverage our finances for international relations. He's not getting elected, right? And, you know, that's what we executives do all the time. We use all this elusive language that means a lot to us. And I know it's really hard because, you know, to us it feels and sounds clear, but you've had the benefit of thinking about it for ages, and your audience is just being introduced to the idea. And if you want to just introduce your audience to an idea and have them run with it, make it visual and also make it specific. Specific means that there's a point in time in which it happens. You don't have to say when that point of time is, but it has to happen somewhere where when we accomplish this, the mission is done. So it's visual and it's specific, right? When we win the championship, it's specific. And that, you know, the brain needs that kind of clarity if it's actually going to move forward. So in the talking points you create in your Communication Made Simple framework, make sure that they are visual, it's a visual climactic scene, and it's specific so people know where the story is actually heading. Once you define each of these talking points on your talking points worksheet, you can use them to create speeches, you can use them to create videos, you can use them in writing emails, you can use them in social media posts, and you can even use them to create a press release. But what you've got to have are your talking points down so that you can deliver your talking points.
So what are some examples as we wrap up the hour? What are some examples of very specific deliverables that solve a problem at a very specific time?
Did you say like guaranteed income for life with an annuity?
There you go. So soon as that guaranteed income annuity is put in place, as soon as it is live, excuse me, then your spouse will never have to worry about income ever again. Is that not a specific solution that is implemented at a very specific time? There's a specific finish line. So what other specific deliverables can we give people so that they clearly understand there is a finish line? Because I know you have multiple people in this room have others.
Go ahead, guys. I took the easy one.
How about succession planning? If you have, let's say, an insurance policy that ensures that if the purchaser of the business, anything happens to them, you're still, as the business owner that sold the business, still going to get paid for that particular transition of the ownership of that business. What are some others?
Running out.
Go ahead.
Running out of money.
Okay. So what specific finish line with solution do we implement that once they know that they've achieved it, they don't have to worry about it?
Setting up an annuity.
Okay. So that's a specific, once the annuity is set in place, they know that that income is going to be there for life no matter what. What, for you specifically, Brian, What
Yep.
what do you put into place that gives them the peace of mind that once this is in place, I know that I don't have to worry about losing the family business?
A life insurance policy.
Okay, so that's specific once it's in place, and then you have to articulate how does that ensure the success of the business not falling out of the hands of the family. Those are the specific deliverables that we're talking about that are tangible. They're not elusive. They're very specific, and they know that once put in place, they don't have to worry about the problem anymore. How about for you, Garth?
Get your end game established.
Exactly. Yeah, and so what is the specific deliverable that you provide that will help put that end game in place?
Well, there's 3 steps. One is resolve. 2 is to define your team, and 3 is put your money into it. So we can pick any of those points, but the end game is when you've funded your plan.
And so once you establish who those people are and you've funded the plan, then they no longer have to worry about an ambiguous end game. They now have a specific end game that they have put in writing, they've funded it, and they know that it'll play out the exact way that they want to, correct?
Right. You made all the hard decisions before you had to make them.
Correct. And once you help them establish that, they never have to worry about it playing out in any alternative other than the one that they wanted.
Exactly.
That's what we have to articulate for your business, being very specific that if you want to ensure the end game plays out the way you want it to, you got to go through the process of working with Garth and putting that in place. And once we fund it, you'll have nothing. You'll have that peace of mind and not ever have to worry about somebody interfering with how that plan plays out. And that's a huge thing. I mean, so many families have all these great intentions, and then it ends up becoming a war with the siblings or the next generation about how mom and dad are going to be taken care of, who's taking care of them, what facility they're going to go to. And especially if you've lost capacity to be able to participate in that conversation, you haven't done it in advance, it can be absolutely disastrous and totally implode a family. So that is a very specific result that delivers a very specific solution. So very good. Any other examples as we wrap up? We got 5 minutes and there's only 29 seconds. So let me play the end of this and then we will go ahead and wrap up. And you guys got to watch the sunrise behind me. It's now almost 7 o'clock in Maui.
To an audience in a coherent and interesting way and invite others to join you in the story. So when you fill out this worksheet, if you want to do it on by yourself, if you're a small organization, or if you just want to get your head around this, you can do it by yourself. But really, you probably want to put your team together, watch this course, and figure out your talking points first, and then you begin creating your collateral. All right, so in a coming video, JJ Cool and I are going to show you a fictional example of good talking points for a specific campaign within a fictional organization, right? This will give you a better understanding of how to use this powerful tool and finally get your communication strategy streamlined so that your words are understood, they are interesting, and they inspire change.
All right. So Nico did put the fillable worksheet into the chat. So please click on that before you wrap up this session so you don't lose the opportunity to download that PDF. And are there any other questions as we wrap up today's coaching session?
It's a nice fake transitional background you got. How did you do that?
I just sat in the lobby. The only place I could plug in my computer. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's flexibility and patience. We will continue this conversation next Wednesday. So as he talked about giving examples, we're going to be doing that next week, giving examples. And I encourage everybody I'm going to do a replay for other advisors, but I do encourage you to try and brainstorm out these talking points, because these talking points are more than just story brand on a landing page. It's something we want to carry over to to our seminars, our workshops, conversations that we have in our first initial sales meetings, our phone calls, introductory phone calls. So it's really important that we have that clear message that we repeat in every element of our marketing, so that, again, exercise of memorization, the more we're reinforcing the same messaging about the problem we solve, how we solve it, when we solve it, I think will help us convert more business, more prospects into business. And when you do that, you don't need audiences of tens of thousands of people. You can convert higher on a smaller, more niche audience, in which you can create more business. So,
Hey, Rob, question on this on
Yep.
the workbook. If you've got two strategies that are completely different, right? And let's say one of them is cost savings, like Cheryl does some stuff on cost savings, and then you've got another program that you're doing. Should we be doing like this workbook for each of those strategies?
yeah, and it's just a worksheet. It's only a couple
Okay.
pages, but but yes, I would most definitely do two different talking points, because they're two different problems, really digging deep into those problems. For us, the two things that we talk about most in our business really is guaranteed income and tax mitigation. Those are and they're two different conversations, but those are the two conversations we have the most, and so they are two different sets of talking points.
Okay, but you could also do this like if you had a particular audience of problems that you're trying to solve for them.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and this just helps you gain some clarity about every time you communicate the message, you're communicating it with the same phrases, the same words, the same solutions. It just makes it easier for them to memorize. It's kind of like a good example of this, and we'll wrap up with this. What does Tom Hegna say about solving the problem of guaranteed income versus solving the problem of desired income in retirement? What is his catchphrase? Paychecks versus playchecks. So, or paychecks and playchecks. That's he reinforces that messaging over and over and over again, because he solves one. Let's first solve the income you need and make it guaranteed. Then we'll have fun focusing on the income you want. And he says that message over and over and over again. It makes it easy to memorize. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. We just hit the hour, so I'm grateful you guys joined us. This is going to be a great new year. We have lots of growth and opportunity this year. We really want to hit it strong and put all of the resources that we have behind you guys to have a very successful 2023. So happy new year, and I look forward to the success we're all going to share in the new year. And I will see you guys Friday at the same time.